gets back to Yorkshire.
Yeah, right, okay, we'll get on to the last bit of the day. So as was mentioned earlier on, just going to talk a little bit around the DPP side of things. Obviously, there's been a bit talked about by Tags and Madick around the pathway nationally and the what and the how, so I won't repeat some of that sort of stuff. I've had my material stolen. So it'll be very much around kind of what it looks like within Yorkshire, what to expect from the upcoming year, and a little bit about why, and then there'll be a bit of discussion around some of the nomination side of things as well. Okay, so there's a few coaches in the room who've experienced it and some that will hopefully do so in future. And then we'll get on to a little bit of a Q&A at the end as well. So first bit, just in terms of those of you that are kind of club or coaches or school teachers, in terms of how to nominate, so just a quick refresher on this. So you can see there, when nomination windows open, information will go directly to clubs and to schools. So all the clubs and all the schools in Yorkshire will be able to nominate players for the programme. So as Tags mentioned earlier on from the national principles, is it's open to everybody. And like I say, you know, any club, any school in Yorkshire can nominate players to the programme. Okay. For those of you that are club coaches, the way we distribute information is via GMS. And information will go directly from myself or whoever my successor is, straight to clubs with all the nomination information you will need. And it will go to one of three contacts at the club. So either your youth contact, your club coach coordinator, or your club secretary. So one of those three individuals should receive the nomination information. It's vitally important from our perspective that those people are up to date on GMS, because if they're not, it will not get through. Okay, I will try and chase things up as well. So I use the Facebook group, the Yorkshire Fixtures Facebook group. There's a load of coaches and people on there, so I send information through that. And I'm quite happy to take emails as well for those that want to know a bit more information who haven't received details. We do try our best to get it out there as wide as possible, but it does slip through the net every now and then. So just feel free to drop whoever's the DPP manager is a message. Oh, hang on. Temperamental. For those of you in schools, so what we'll usually ask is that the County Schools Union, so Nick, who's sat down there at the front, kindly distributes information to us, to the schools that are affiliated to the Yorkshire County Schools Union. And we also utilise White Rose Rugby as well, who work with a lot of the other schools across Yorkshire, who are perhaps not affiliated but do deliver some rugby. Okay, so that's kind of our nomination process. And as it said at the top there, we do it all online via Google Forms. Just enter the nomination information in there, so a bit about yourself as a coach, and then about the players that you're nominating. And then from that particular point, I pick up the comms and then send information and details about what assessment and opportunities look like. So that's a quick one in terms of how we nominate. A little bit around the windows to expect this season. So under 14s, there'll be an early season block, October, ready for some activity in November, December, mid-season block, January for February, and then end of the season, so March, April, and then April, May activity. So there may be a slight change to that. So that first block this year potentially won't take place. Obviously, I'm moving on as of today. So with the admin side of things and somebody getting in post and up to speed, it may not be possible to get that first block organised efficiently. But there will be the second two blocks, and obviously it runs through 15s and 16s as well. If you're going into under 15s this season, first entry assessment for that age group will be kind of September for October, November. We've got a current 14s group moving through, so there will be adding to that group. And then at the end of the season, there's another assessment opportunity. So we run roughly every 6 months. Again, as Teg just said earlier on, there's multiple entry and exit points, not just within DPP, but with the wider pathway as a whole. And then finally, under 16s, there's a final opportunity to access the DPP. Nominations October for an assessment in December, and that is before DPP finishes at the end of March. Last opportunity to access the programme. But as has been seen on the diagrams earlier on, there's opportunities through county and academy rugby at under 17s, under 18s as well. And you know, Gilly, Dicko, Sharpie, the coaches will spend time out and about on the ground in the clubs and schools as well, looking to identify and support further players where necessary. So that's a snapshot of what to expect this season in terms of nomination windows. There'll be updates come through on those kind of as and when more details are known, but that's the kind of current plan for those that are expecting to see that sort of stuff this year. terms of what it looks like at each particular age group, under 14s, so slight change this year to what we're going to try and deliver. So we're going to look at the under 14 age group in Yorkshire is going to be a non-selective programme. Okay, we're going to run DPP activity. Clubs and schools will be able to nominate players to attend that activity, but there's going to be no assessment or no selection at this particular age group this year. Okay, so it's new to us, going to give it a go, and then stuff will come in, nomination assessment, then selection will come in at under 15s and beyond. Questions in the room, I can see a couple of faces probably thinking, why is that the case at this particular moment in time? First of all, we see it as a really good opportunity to actually get some education for coaches and for teachers that are nominating players. As it's the first opportunity, the first DPP access point for this age group, it's difficult to understand and to know what DPP might look like at that particular age group if you've not seen it before. What DPP players look like, what to expect at nomination assessment events, which players to nominate. So we see it's a really valuable opportunity to actually run some activity, invite coaches and teachers, players, parents along to this activity to get some education around what DPP is about, what it looks like, what the principles are, what the purpose is. So there'll be activity running, and we'll try and give more players, more coaches an opportunity to actually come along to the sessions and get involved in those as well. So what we've done this year is we've actually invited nominating coaches to deliver some of the activity. We've had the DPP coaches do some of the assessing, but delivered by club coaches, school teachers, and off the back of that, we've identified some coaches that we've invited to join DPP because they've delivered some good quality stuff in the assessment events. So that'd be one reason, an education opportunity for coaches and teachers who are nominating. Second thing would be an experience of DPP. So players and parents get to come along, if you're nominated, get involved in some DPP activity without the kind of pressure, the added side of being assessed and being watched all the way through. Come along, see what it's all about, get some information, get some delivery around the technical stuff that's been talked about, potentially some of the athletic potential stuff as well, without having to worry about the pressure of being assessed, because we do see players coming along to these events really, really nervous. Players have been sick, they've been panicking, and they perhaps don't put the best foot forward. So an experience of it before you attend an assessment event hopefully stands you in better stead moving forwards, and it gives everybody an understanding, an experience of what to expect when we do get to kind of nomination and assessment events. And like I've said there, coaches as well will be able to get involved. So if you nominate a player or players, you will say, would you like to get involved in supporting the delivery? You'll be able to get involved, get hands-on. We'll provide session plans, provide some information on what to deliver, and give it a go. And as I said, it allows us to identify some coaches to join the programme as well. And finally, readiness of players. As has been mentioned earlier on as well by the guys, it's under 14s is particularly still very early in kind of physical maturation of players, and players will change massively between 14 and 15, 14 and 16. So with it being so early and rugby being a late specialisation sport, is it the optimal time to be assessing players for longer term potential, or is it better off delaying that until under 15s, under 16s, once we've seen a bit more development physically, once we understand a bit more about where players may head, what their development process is like. Okay, and the other side of things that probably doesn't get talked about sometimes would be the kind of emotional maturity. Players will have that much pressure on them at assessment events. Like I said, the panicky side of things, the nerves will kick in. Are they ready to receive that news that you're not selected on this occasion? Are they ready to be putting their best foot forward in an assessment event? What will they respond like once they don't get in? So there's an emotional maturity side of things as well that we see on a fairly regular basis. So that would be kind of our three reasons of why we're going to look at under 14s as an opportunity to just get an experience and education, understand the process a bit more, so that when you come to 15s, you guys as coaches will know, I saw that last year at 14s, I know which players I probably should be nominating now, which guys are ready, which guys might not be ready, which are emotionally ready to get stuck in, be more accurate nominations, and players, again, will perhaps be a little bit more comfortable as well in the environment that we're trying to create. Under 15s, so obviously, like I said, we've got a 14s group moving through this year. In future years, potentially be a first entry assessment. So in line with the stuff that principles that Dicko mentioned earlier on, top 10% of players is roughly what's suggested. So for a club or school with roughly a squad of 30 players, how many guys would you have in your squad? 20 at the moment, Rob? Cozy? Yeah, so generally around 20, 25. That would suggest that potentially 2 or 3 players from your particular group would be ready for DPP, would be in a DPP group, just as a bit of an indicator, okay? 10% is what we'd be looking for, okay? On that basis, for a first entry, first time you get a chance to nominate players, because there's no players in the system already, you'll likely get 4, possibly even more nominations, give a wider number of players an opportunity to be assessed and be spend some time in the DPP. But you know, obviously we do understand that within your particular regions, some clubs and schools will be stronger, might have bigger squads, more players, less players. So naturally, some clubs will have more players on our DPP programme. Some clubs will have less. But you know, we've got different processes to account for that. So there'll be 2 opportunities at 15s, 1 at 16s. Any players we pick up on outside of those sessions can be invited into sessions. So we don't have to get players in at the first opportunity. We've got 4 nominations. Send the 4 that you think are most ready at that particular moment in time. And then further down the line, you can nominate further players when they're progressing or if they're ready to get stuck in at that particular point. Okay. And then end of season, further assessment opportunity, like I mentioned. We will probably reduce the number of nominations available. As I've said, if we've already got a group of 25 players in DPP, we're just topping up numbers. We're going to work with around 30. So we might add 3, 4, 5 players to the group. So we don't need to see 60 kids again. Send us your top 1, top 2, if any at all. Those that are most ready for DPP, and they will get a better experience, more accurate assessment, and hopefully get onto the programme if that's the right thing for them. So that's under 15, sorry. 16s, as mentioned before, it's the last opportunity. Again, it'll be similar sort of basis. So you get a couple of nominations, add them to the programme. But as mentioned before, the pathway does continue through county and academy rugby at under 17, under 18 groups. So if you're not in DPP, doesn't mean you can't access the pathway. If you develop later, as is the case with rugby in a lot of ways, there's still opportunities at 17s and 18s. There is academy selection scheduled for under 16 age group as well, so roughly around October is when that will happen. And again, there's an assessment event there which will top up numbers, so we'll take 35, 40 players potentially out of DPP, bigger opportunity for players to access the programme, okay, if it's the right thing for them, so take a bigger number in at that particular point in time. Again, usually a limit of 2 nominations. What we might do is add some position-specific nominations as well. So, as was alluded to earlier on, we see lots of centres, scrum halves, fly halves, back rowers. When it comes to game stuff at under 16s, it might be that North group, we've only got 1 prop for the game block. Okay, well, let's add some front row specific nominations and get some of those guys into the programme. They've probably matured physically. The physical maturation's coming along at that age group, so we know more a bit about who may be a prop longer term, who may be a second row. So that's why we add position-specific stuff as well. Later developers and potentially a shortfall in some groups, in some positions. Any questions there in terms of the process we're looking at this year? No, the stuff being produced that will be shared will be available online as well. So if there's any questions, you'll be able to access bits at your own leisure. In terms of who to nominate, hopefully a lot of us in this room will have seen our STAR model. And these are some of the traits, like I said, that we look for in DPP players. It aligns to the stuff Tag was talking about earlier on, so in terms of skills, in terms of tactical awareness, athletic potential, and then that kind of coachability, resilience piece on the end of there. This is kind of a framework to operate from and gives an indication. What we wouldn't expect to see would be players that are showing all of those traits at a high level all the way through the programme, okay? If you're showing all of those at under 14s, let's get him signed up and get him on the pathway and get him straight through to the England squad. Okay, at 14s, 15s, you may be showing one of those, maybe showing 2 or 3, and it will vary so much from position to position. So I'm going to give a little task just in kind of pairs or groups of the guys around you, just to think what this may look like at under 14s or under 15s. Okay, so just have a quick discussion with somebody around you. What might a Danny Kerr have looked like at under 14s? Yeah, good Yorkshireman, England scrum half. What might you have expected to see from a 14-year-old Danny Kerr? What might you have expected to see from a 14, 15-year-old Maro Itoji? What might you expect to see in a 14, 15-year-old Johnny May? Okay, so if you want to have a quick discussion with the guys around you, what you might expect to see at that age group and how that differs to what you might see in those players now. Oh, is that? No. Just want to give it a minute for to think about any of the positions I might not have mentioned. So your centres, your back rowers, your tens, and then just the kind of obvious ones that I've mentioned. Okay, if we start wrapping up and closing the conversations, we'll just come to the room for a few thoughts. So if we use Danny Kerr as an example, any volunteers, or I'll just start picking on people? Yeah, go on then. Yeah, so what do we mean by basics? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. You might see, good core skills in terms of good pass ability as a scrum half, particularly. Perhaps be quite good technically with the tackle side of things because you'll be tackling bigger blokes. Might only be quite small. That's what Danny Kerr might look like at 14. Okay. Skip forward a couple of years. Physically developed a bit more through his kind of involvement in the pathway. Still got that game understanding that's further developed. Those core skills and position-specific skills have got a bit stronger. Agility is really good. High tempo to the game. Perhaps look different at 14s. What about Maro Itoji, second rows? Volunteers?
Good athletic potential.
Good athletic potential, how?
I would imagine to be quite tall, athletic,
Yeah.
strong, quick in relation to those around him.
Yes, potentially a bit of an earlier developer. He's obviously got the stature. If he's had experience and an opportunity to get involved in athletic development stuff, he might move quite well. He might be quite strong, physical. Okay, but what else might a second row look like at that particular age group?
Good work rate, ability to stay in the game.
Good work rate, ability to stay in the game. What we kind of look for at second rows at kind of the top end of the game, so those that are going into kind of prem stuff, the number one thing they'll look at is kind of height. Okay, you might have a player at 14, 15 years old. He's 6'4", 6'5", probably got quite tall parents. If his dad's 6'6", 6'7", his mum's quite tall. There's another indicator that he might be quite a tall athlete moving forwards. What will those guys move like when they're going through that kind of growth spurt? Yeah, for want of a better word, they might move a bit like a giraffe. There will be all arms and legs. They might not move particularly well. They're going through a growth spurt. The core skills may not be great. They might be dropping all the balls that will come at them. Okay, they might struggle to get the low tackle stuff in there. The athletic stuff that Sharpie will talk about, they might not move particularly well, be able to squat, all those bits and pieces. But, he's only got one, perhaps got one, maybe two of these traits in here. Athletic potential, is he got a standout ability in terms of stature in relation to peers? And have they got a good attitude? Are they resilient? Do they work hard? That might be all you see. Those guys will get missed because coaches may look and go, well, he can't catch, pass, tackle, he doesn't understand the game, he just tries to carry, so we're not going to nominate him. But we miss second rows that are 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", because we look at this side of things probably a little bit too much. Okay, what might a winger look like? I'm going to come to Lee and you guys.
Some athletic potential, skills, catch, pass, speed.
Yeah, so definitely speed and agility would be something we'd look at a winger. Perhaps got some good skills, hopefully be able to tackle, catch, Okay? But referring back to some of the conversations before, on an assessment day, what might that winger do? Just hide out on an edge, not get the ball. Okay, we may not see the best of him. Coaches, how often the ball get to your wingers in games? If you've got 9s, 10s, 12s, 13s that are not great handlers of the ball, can't get the ball to space, will that winger ever touch the ball? Would it be somebody you'd nominate based on that? Potentially not. But if he can run the 100 metres in 10 seconds, we still want to see him. As Tagger said before, we can develop the bits that players are missing. If you sit in this area really well, the pathway will design to develop these bits. If you sit really well here, then we provided some extra support potentially around those pieces. Okay, so it's not always about kind of what's that initial thought in front of you, what we see on game days on a Saturday. Because like we've said, you'll get your back rowers would be a bigger physical guys, mobile, do a lot of work, hit the breakdowns, make loads of tackles. Your 9s and 10s will probably be quite skillful, probably have good tactical awareness. Okay. But do we miss the front 5 players, the big lads in the front row, who will develop later on? The second row is the wingers who are really quick. Let's not neglect these bits in terms of long-term potential just because we focus on those bits too much. Okay? So hopefully a bit of a useful exercise there just to get us reflecting on what these players might look like at different age groups, under 14s, under 15s.
Can I just ask, so front row?
Yes.
If you've got a player that's always played front row and you look at their parents and the parents are big, so they're going to become big.
Yeah.
But they've not matured physically yet. Do you wait and send them later, or would you send them early? What would their kind of coach's comment to say, small now, but their parents, we think he's going to be big?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's probably no right or wrong answer that kind of blankets things. If they're not maturing physically yet, then it may be that they come into the fore in the kind of 17s, 18s county stuff, or get picked up through academy. If you feel there's long-term potential there and they're doing enough, they might have that athletic potential that comes from the parents. They might have a really, really great attitude towards stuff and be really coachable. Yeah, we perhaps want to see him nominated during sessions and just add a note with something along because he's got this side of things. You may decide, what, he's not ready yet. Let's leave it a year, 2 years, getting through to county stuff. Okay, there's no kind of right or wrong, I don't think, with that. But I think certainly from kind of Gilly's perspective, we want to see these guys probably a little bit earlier and develop those other bits around it. Okay? So if you see someone like that who's a bigger kid who's got parents that are quite large, send him along, get him involved. If we see there's long-term potential there, let's bring him through. We'll put that work into, like Tag says, once we're on the programme, they're going to stay there, so they get extra support, extra opportunity. But obviously, you guys in clubs and schools know the players best, so you kind of make a call. Is it now the right time to get him through to us?
I completely agree with what you said there, G. For me, I'd always factor it back on how is that player presenting himself. And we start to look at the N1 there around resilience. That's the kind of player that we know we can develop the other 3 things in. That's quite hard to develop. Somebody who's committed to his training, works hard, even though he may not be as skillful. Yeah, I'd definitely be nominating those kinds of players.
I think the front rows are a specific kind of entity in themselves, aren't they?
Well, it kind of is and it isn't. Fundamentally, we tend to come back to a point that Dico probably made earlier around. The reason why we get lots of 8, 9, 10, 12s, 13s nominated is because they're the most influential places on the pitch. So therefore we tend to pick our most skillful players into one of those areas. It's not necessarily that they are, there's many of those who are in that front row. The reality is we look at a player, you're going to go to front row. That's the first thing we look at. So the first thing we look at is the physical attribute, not necessarily the skill attribute. So I think we get hung up on the wrong things. I think what we should be fundamentally looking at is how is this guy applying himself in my training session? Does he have a hunger to learn? Irrespective of the size, shape, skill, if he has a hunger to learn, probably needs to be in his program. That's quite a hard thing to assess against. But I'm pretty sure you as a coach can right now be thinking about our 2 that we didn't dominate that actually have that hunger.
So the hard part is when you've got more than the 4 to send, and that's urgent.
Yeah, and look, there's no perfect system. There is no perfect system.
So just as a rationale, then, why have you got more than 4? Why do you have more than 4?
Well, we sent 4 to the first selection, all 4 got in. We sent 2 to the second selection, and 2 they both got in.
Yeah.
And I've got others that haven't been yet. But I'm thinking of one specifically, which Dan's a copper, and he's enormous, shoulders, tall, and he's playing front row. He's technically very good, but he hasn't grown yet. So he hasn't had the opportunity to come yet, but he does a bit of training session, he's technically sound. It's just that he's not being quite as good as the ones that we have said.
Yeah. But that'd be a perfect example of not ready yet.
Yeah.
And you're having those ongoing conversations with him and go, look, at some point you're going to go this way.
And he fits the resilient box really well, because we've had those conversations. He said, fine, what do I need to do next?
And that's that potential piece versus current ability piece as well. So, you know, we get the big kids that are sent through because perceived as being the best players because they're just, you know, a foot taller and 2 stone heavier than everybody else. Best player by miles. Is he? He might have.
Sorry, you have a conversation you're then going to have because this lad has a lower skill level, has great resilience and athletic potential. You're going to have conversations with parents whose players are very skillful, but have less athletic potential and resilience. So it's a real dichotomy. It's a real strange place to be. That's why we've got to be strong on the principles.
Yeah, and the other thing to consider, particularly front row stuff, and there's 1 or 2 examples out there today potentially, is like position transfer stuff as well. You know, we'll use Regan, who is outside, the kind of big, tall, blonde lad who was doing a bit out there. Came into DPP as a centre. Obviously, you know, at club level as a 6'4" centre who's, you know, twice the size of everybody else. He's going to do some damage at 12, but he's going to do some damage on the wing or at prop or wherever you put him. Long term, is he going to be a centre at academy level? Probably not got the agility, the athleticism for a centre, the handling ability. But has he got long-term potential as a second row? 100% yes, he has, which is why I kind of planted this seed and let him figure it out on his own that he's going to be a second row. And sure enough, he's now kind of working in that group over the summer as a second row. You know, Gilly's a big advocate of finding big centres and turning them into hookers and props and stuff as well, or back rowers that countries.
What I'd say on it is that there are very few top-end props who play prop from the age of 8 years old. Like, the majority of them are very highly good, skillful, good decision-making players through the age group they play anywhere. Think if you're coaching a club side, never pigeonhole. So probably the biggest problem we have as a country in our system is we pigeonhole players early. If you're the biggest kid, go play a prop, or props only hit rucks, whatever it might be. You've heard it, you've seen it. You look at England, all of those front row come from the centre, all 3 of them fly out of the centres.
It's quite interesting because what you're saying there, think back to the laws of the game. You're putting big lads into scrummage that only scrummage for a metre. It's big front of it, but they're pushing for a metre, that's it. The rest of it is about skill and attributes and resilience and athletic potential. It's not about scrummaging.
Yeah.
Even at the top end, so when the kid to us at university level, you know, we have the amount of lads that we convert and send to prop or hooker. But what would sort of be better for these players is to experience that at some point during their journey. Why don't we have multiple opportunities for everyone to give line out lifting a go at 14, scrummaging a go? Granted, you'll have probably people that will stay in the back, be really, well, why am I doing this? I'm never going to be there. But you don't know how you're going to grow, what's going to happen. You can get in that. I got injured at uni in bottom 4.5 stone, you know, so I suddenly found myself moving further forward. But that's just sort of what happens. It would be easier when we get these lads now, we could transition them into the front row a lot easier at 18 if they've already had some of the skills and development of how to lift, how to throw. Because they're already there. We're doing them an injustice by not giving them an opportunity to try.
Lovely. No, some really valuable input from you guys and from people around the room as well. You can see how much of a kind of broad area it can be and many different perspectives you can get. So hopefully just some of the stuff we've talked about there and some of the bits that have been mentioned just give a different perspective and a different lens on some of the players you might have in your particular groups and think, are they ready yet? Could they be somewhere else? What might they look like in a couple of years? Should we nominate them now? Should we do it later? So just to kind of wrap up from my point of view before we go into a Q&A and we can perhaps dig into some of those bits a little bit more around the room. Will be some of the common issues which we encounter, probably from a selfish point of view. It makes my job particularly difficult at times when we get some of these things that crop up. So it'll just be a little bit of a request from coaches, I suppose, if you're nominating players in future and some of the things to think about. So one would be kind of an over-nomination of players. You know, we put on kind of a limit on the number of nominations. So like I say, firstly, it falls into that top 10% we talk about. Secondly, in terms of a logistical point of view and trying to run assessment events, I've had days where we've had, 400 or 500 players through a day across different age groups. Logistically, it makes it a nightmare in terms of organisation side of things. But then in terms of accuracy and quality of experience, if you come along to an assessment event and we're going in groups of 10, you're playing a bit of 5-on-5, how many touches the ball is that player going to get? Going to get lots of exposure, lots of opportunities to show what they can do. If we've got huge numbers and we're not able to resource those numbers as effectively, how many touches the ball is that player going to get if we're playing 10-on-10? It's going to go down by, probably a quarter of number of involvements. Okay, so we've got less opportunity to show what they can do. In terms of the assessment side of things, if you're being assessed, one assessor to 10 players, is comfortably manageable. If we then have to go out to one assessor to 20 players, how accurate is that going to be? They're going to spend half as much time looking at each player individually. That's when you may get some of the feedback comes back and you think, well, do you think you're wrong on that? Well, we've had to try and make the best judgment we can with what we've got. So there's a reason we put a limit on number on nominations. It helps us keep the event manageable, provides a better quality of experience for the players that are there and the parents that are there, and it hopefully makes the assessment piece and the information and the feedback that you get more accurate. Okay, we mentioned before, you might have, like Rob said, more players that be ready for DPP. Send your top 4, for want of a kind of better way, or the 4 that are most ready at the moment to the first one. If they get in, great. Then you've got 2 next time, potentially a third one position specific, and just keep topping up. Like I say, generally we don't get clubs with more than probably 6 or 7 in a particular group. There's the odd exception here and there, but as a general rule of thumb, 6 or 7 would be the most we'd have from a particular club. Okay. Second thing, as we talked about a little bit already, are players ready to be nominated? Are they going to attend an assessment event and be comfortable putting themselves forward, get involved, not just hide on the outside? Or are they going to kind of go and just be too nervous and stand at the side and not get involved and not put the best foot forward and perhaps not have the best quality of experience? Are they ready to hear the feedback that they might get that they're not ready for DPP at this moment in time? So, ask a player, would you like to be nominated for DPP, first of all? Okay. Are they ready to be nominated for DPP? If both of those are yes, then yeah, let's crack on. Let's see. If you think they may not be there yet, there's nothing wrong with holding off. Just because we get 4 nominations doesn't mean we have to nominate 4 players. If you've got a squad of 20 and you think 2 are ready, just send me 2. Don't fill up your other 2 lads. Let's give them a good time, because the chances are they won't have a good time. They might be out of the depth, not have a great day, get some pretty average feedback, and then not want to do DPP again in future when they may actually be ready to do it. Okay? So think about our players ready to be nominated. And then lastly, as we've talked about a little bit already, position of players. Okay? We've had one I think North group this year, one particular age group. I think I had roughly 50 nominations. Half of those were back row players. 25 out of 50 players nominated in that area were back row players. I think I saw 1 hooker, 1 winger, and then the rest were centres and fly-offs and scrum-offs. Okay? That athletic potential piece and that resilience piece, if you've got guys that you think could develop in those positions, wingers, front rows, second rows, we want to see those guys as well. Okay, it may be that they don't see as much on a weekend. The winger might not see the ball in advance of the nomination period. Your second row might not look like a great player at that particular point in time. Long-term wise, we still want to see these guys nominated and potentially got a better chance of getting in if they're there as well. Okay, so just have a think about kind of which positions and which players we're nominating there. Position-wise, we will assess players based on kind of obviously the principles as well. But if you send us a centre as a prop, they'd probably view that lens as a prop as a starting point. You may think, yeah, it's actually more suitable elsewhere. But if you've got a position-specific nomination as a front 5 player, you use that as a chance to send us an extra centre. Not doing us any favours and probably not doing the player any favours either. So yeah, the final message, just you guys are here, so you're clearly doing this already, but develop your understanding of what we're looking for at DPP, what the pathway looks like, what we look for in academy, county, and then hopefully that helps you consider a bit more carefully which players to nominate at which particular point in time. It'd be great for me if I was to attend an assessment event and I've got 25 players there and I think all these guys are ready for DPP, let's bring them all in. Okay, rather than having to go, we've got to pick the top 5 or 6 out of these 40. Okay, if you've taken some of this on board, you can reflect on that a little bit more. We've got an open door policy to sessions. Come to a DPP session, come to an academy session. We're quite happy to let people in and discuss stuff and see what the environment's about, see what the players look like. So then when you go back to club or you go back to school, you're perhaps a bit more informed about what it looks like. You've got a reference point. So you might think, he's in my top 3 or 4 players. but he's not in the top 3 or 4 of his position in the area, so he's not ready for DPP just yet. So a message from me, and hopefully help somebody out in future who takes over, would be, can we be more accurate, more selective, kind of around which players we think are ready for DPP at the moment, have a better understanding, and then just send me those guys rather than just trying to send guys through. You know, we've had clubs before send me 15 players because they've managed to manipulate forms and the way we do things, and I get 15 players from one club, just, oh dear. And then 12 of them get pretty average feedback and they go, well, DPP is rubbish. Okay, so we've got to do our bit with that as well, but you know, let's hopefully kind of reflect and think about nominations a little bit more.
Do the schools and the clubs communicate with each other so you don't get the same?
So this is part of where it comes. So what we're going to do, we encourage clubs and schools to work together to identify the right players. So if I as a club coach think, yeah, I want to nominate Stuart, and then Tags as a school teacher thinks I want to nominate Stuart, probably the right person to nominate. Not me as a club coach going, right, Dicko, you nominate 4, Tags, you nominate 4, Gilly, you nominate 4, Sharpie, you nominate 4, and we'll get 16 players there. We want clubs and schools to work together from that perspective in terms of let's get the right boys there. And it also helps in terms of, you know, wider perspective, community rugby, get more players into your club, but let's not use it to get as many players there as we possibly can, because that's where those kind of issues start to arise. And I can see which clubs do it, and I know full well which clubs do it, and if they are doing it, they'll likely get a phone call off me or an email saying, which of these guys are going to send, because I'm not having all 15 of them. Okay, so great point. And there's a really valuable way to do it is to discuss between club and school, but for the right reasons.
So I guess my thoughts on that would be, so generally speaking, and it's a very overgeneralisation, is that school teachers will be on the benchmark where that year 9, year 10 pupil is compared to last year's year 9, year 10. In the kind of club environment, you generally focus on the group you've had. If you're lucky, you might have been through the cycle once before with an elder sibling, but generally, you know what good looks like for you in that moment. Speak to the guys above. Like, you sent some guys last year to TPP. What was your experience? What would you do differently next time? So I'm not saying teachers are the experts who club coaches are, but they've got probably a bit more to benchmark. So I've seen kids come through year 9, year 10, year 11 before. Whereas the club, if you're there at registration day under 7 and you happen to have a pair of boots, then you're knackered, you're going to coach that team for the next 12 years. So unlucky. But go on.
Sorry, because if there's a piece there for maybe a club coordinator or you're
Absolutely.
in charge of to use that you are in a club, is you can't dip in, or you might not have the year group above, then in an ideal world, and that's what we're talking about, you've got a club coaching board or whoever who says, you know, and say, look, come and have a look, you know, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And use those people that have been through the system,
Yeah.
the clubs.
There's some really good models of good practice around that in a few clubs knocking about, and you know, and they take that little bit of pressure away from you as a coach as well. You know, it might be you'll be getting parents wanting to get their lads onto the programme and getting it from different people. You know, and you're under pressure to try and get those nominations through and try and appease everybody. So if there's somebody kind of independent who can kind of like an older coach from one of the older age groups who can come down and you say, I'm thinking potentially these 5 or 6, come along, based on my experience, these 2 or 3 may be right, these 2 maybe a little bit later on. There's some really good models of kind of practice around that. I think Sandal were one of the clubs that were really good a couple of years ago at doing that. Go on, mate, yeah.
The second thought today and the last one. It's when you play teams in your age groups, you get to know other teams. And I've had those discussions, you know, he's good. Again, as a DPP coach, those lads in DPP, yeah, he's not in because he's a swimmer, he's a cricketer. But again, you're just not gauging in your isolated team, then you can, yeah, he's good and he's actually a bit better than what I thought my best player, you know, so there's use those other teams and players. Have that discussion with coaches.
Yeah, there's 2 kind of sides to that. You know, if we're talking about top 10% of players, 2 per position roughly, would that player be in the top 2 or 3 players in the clubs you played in your particular area as a bit of a guideline? The other thing that we really like to see, and it's happened a few times, but something we would encourage more of, is nominate players from other clubs and schools. It particularly comes from guys on the programme. So Nick contacted me, this kid from whatever school down the road was really good, is he on programme? Yeah, he's there. Other guys have done it before. We saw this kid playing against a team from another area. He was class, he should be in DPP. Not heard his name before, let me contact those guys, getting along. So it's really, really great for us if we can get nominate people from other environments, because that shows that they're clearly kind of standing out with what they're doing. And if we hear the same name crop up 2 or 3 times, we're definitely keen to take a look. So, Rob, did you have a...
Yeah, sorry, just on the previous, I don't want to go backwards, but on the previous point was getting other club coaches and officials to look. So we started doing that at Scarborough, and it's really helpful mentioned giving them a list of 5 or 6, and so that's how we started doing it. And actually, we found that they only looked at those 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And what we started doing now is saying, just come and have you identified someone that we haven't seen? Because you can get very blinkered when you're with them 3 times a week, and you miss the potential of the superstar that's not getting enough ball.
There's a whole conversation there around like kind of coach biases, conscious, unconscious as well. Just around what your preference would be. And I recognise I was a back, so I would naturally look for that sort of thing and potentially not look quite as much at the potential front row players, second row players. Whereas now that I understand it a bit more, I kind of can look with a bit of a different lens to stuff.
There is the Principles of Selection online resource.
There is?
Nice plug. Got it in for you. There we go.
Selection online, CPD modules, you can send out and help give you some guidance and advice of when we're selecting players, what sort of things we need to be aware of. And that's something we'll get sent out.
I think it's a really nice segue. We kind of got to the point of asking and answering some questions. So I think there's been loads thrown at you today, and I don't expect everybody to have taken everything in, which is why we've recorded it and we'll share. But if there's anything that's kind of cropped up across Sharpie, Gillies, tags myself or Givo, then ask now. But like Chris said, what we'll share on the back of this, because if you remember, one of my first points about why we're doing things is to create an effective player development system. And to be really effective, we need that kind of joined-up thinking. So if Scarborough playing against Ionians, that you feel you've got our kind of blessing to go and listen to a kid at Ionians, plays at, he's playing in the centres currently, but he's got loads of potential. Actually, yeah, he's in DPP, but thanks very much. Or, yeah, I've not seen him, and you're the second person to say that, because when they played against Moortown, they said the same kind of thing. So the only way we can be effective, because we are a small resource, is that we collectively start to work together. Like our STAR model is our method. We talked about methods and principles. Every academy in the north of England would have Sharks DNA. Falcons look for players who make you gasp. That's their method of just trying to find players. So if we get to a point where people go, I'm playing against this kid, and in terms of the star, he's very skillful, he's resilient because he got absolutely smashed in the first 5 minutes and kept coming back, or he's shot up. So Lee mentioned his lad, how many? 9 inches and 20 kilos?
In 12 months.
In 12 months as a 14, 15-year-old, that is not uncommon. So he might come to DPP 18 months ago as a scrum half, and now all of a sudden it might be a 6-7. So that's the world we live in. So we need you guys on the ground, like Nick, as a teacher, has been through that. So yeah, I'm waffling, and we did say we'd finish at 2 o'clock, but I'm conscious I want you guys to get as much out of this day as possible, and hopefully then feed back to some of your co-coaching in clubs and schools that this information is out there and we want to work together. So, any questions?
Yeah, just one thing really was for teams really.
Yes.
Obviously you mentioned about putting in the nominations and stuff in.
Yeah.
And then the framework for when the sessions are going to be. But then further on it got to say, well, that's no selection this year. So I'm just wondering, why has it changed? Why has it changed from last year? Do you just think it's the mental readiness of the boys doing it and the pressures, mental pressures?
Yeah, so, I mean, the first part of it is, it's hopefully to provide that education, bit of understanding for the coaches that are nominating. So, if we get those under 14 sessions happening, we're still saying place we come to DPP is, they're going to attend those sessions. And, if you've got 3 nomination opportunities, you can send the same 4 guys 3 times, or you could send 12 players once, depending on what you kind of feel is best for the boys. But, it gives them an experience of DPP, what it's going to be about, what to expect from the days. But we feel a big win for us is having you guys as coaches there. So it might be, if you nominate 4 players, we want you guys as coaches to attend as well. We can deliver some information a bit like this in a more condensed way to support your understanding of nominations. You can see what potentially DPP group would look like by kind of seeing what's there, and potentially get a go at kind of getting hands-on in the sessions as well. And off the back of that, when we do come to a selection event, you kind of go reflect on those same 8 players you might have sent. Actually, you know what, we saw these guys, and these 2 maybe not ready yet, these 4 probably are stronger guys at the minute, they've been doing it at this particular moment in time, rather than just kind of taking a bit of a shot in the dark, having not seen any of it before. Hopefully helps you make a more informed decision and makes the kind of enjoyment of the day better for the boys that do come, and makes it more accurate kind of process from our perspective. So that would be kind of one of the big reasons in the way is just kind of like physical maturity, as we said there. 13, 14 years old is really, really early. There's still under 15, 16, 17, 18 for these guys to be identified and picked into pathways if it's the right thing for them. So holding off that year, we think it's beneficial to get that extra bit of education, extra bit of experience now, so you get a lot of
If there's a question for you guys, I'll unmute it on the thing. So because you guys are...
Yeah, so, you know, you're still going to get to know, you're still going to get to an experience. Did you enjoy that? Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Okay, great, well, I'm going to oh, I'm not sure that's the way. And again, yeah, you know, the education stuff at private, okay, we've been looking at giving stuff to parents as well, as well as like, this is what to expect. Hopefully, time and possibility of time to be able to hold.
Yeah, go ahead.
At what stage, if they're on the academy programme, do you say, actually now you need to focus on?
Yeah, so again, it's personal preference. I know these guys have to pick, but we would advocate doing as much as you can for as long as possible. Now that comes with a caveat that you can't just keep adding more and more and more. So if you become involved in our academy pathway and that's on top of everything else, then you might have something have to go in, which is the most important. So we've got lads involved in cricket academies, national standard tennis players, we've got the league obviously. We try and work together collaboratively and we say which would be your best opportunity of the week. So if you've got a national tennis championships on the weekend, then don't come to our session on Friday night because that's the best opportunity this week. So it's not a politician's answer, but we try and support all the way through. But at some point, we've had good conversations this summer and some lads have exited the academy to go and pursue other options and other players have decided to come and join with us. So certainly around 15, 16, that's when we would suggest, the evidence would say they start to prefer which sport we're going to go down. And you know, that's difficult. And you know, mum and dad are a rugby player, but they actually want to become a swimmer. And mum and dad still keep forcing them to come rugby there and start to see psychosocial and the player lose interest. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that would be our stance. But try and keep it as broad as possible for as long as possible. Yeah.
So just on medical provision and things, talking about obviously what you do, getting people in, but how do you look after them, what provision you provide? Any players as they're going through the system that are, you know, you keep an eye on them, you monitor them, anybody reaching out to them, they might have such a number, if we got injured, how do you keep an eye on them? Or is it that's fine. Obviously, just keep what you're going to do.
It's a really good question. Safeguarding medical are a key part of our pathway. So certainly through DEP, there's some national guidance around what needs to be each session. When you become in the academy, that ramps up a notch. So we've got full-time medics, and our stance is currently, as much as we can resource it, if you get injured on our watch, so if you're playing for us or in our session, we will manage your rehabilitation process start to finish. If you get injured playing at school, we can manage it, we'll pick that up. But we do put pressure on the schools and the clubs because we see them for an hour a week, we play 6-7 games a season with the 18s. And these guys are in other environments doing 5 or 6 hours a week of rugby at school, possibly playing twice a week. And if we kind of advise that injury could get worse if you play and then make that decision, then is it our responsibility to pick up? And it is a case-by-case basis. So something like Tom, England international, we want him on the field as much as possible, representing us. We might have a different philosophy on him, do another lad who's new to the academy. But generally speaking, if you're with us, we'll look after you start to finish. We've certainly done safeguarding for like all coaches within DPP, you know, we run the safeguarding checks, DBSs. And now in this day and age, matter around the head case stuff, so online concussion awareness is key. If there's one thing we could go away with, it would be around that. If in doubt, sit them out. I know it's tough, but for the long-term benefit of the game, we need to make sure we're on top of that. That's a great question. Yes.
So you're talking about on DPP about sort of position-specific players coming in. So as a coach in their sort of team back at club level, would you aim to try and play them in those positions that they're being worked on at the DPP, or would you try and, like you said about trying to play them in different positions to get lots of different experience?
Yeah.
But actually, then they get more, well, yeah, what should we do from sort of coaching and tactical stuff?
And I guess from playing the younger age, the kind of early maturation pieces, but that positions like that, different experiences. You know, like I said, we know which way they're developing moving forward, so kind of certainly kind of 14s, 15s, trying to move around with those different perspectives. Once they start to mature physically, so if they go into 16s, 17s and beyond, you start to see a bit more about where their kind of end point might be, and that's when we've got to be a bit more specific and look at those kind of position-specific skills we need to be seeing that kind of, whether it's academy or going into senior rugby or school stuff. So, a little bit different lens on things, perhaps trying to migrate toward particular positions for that, but again, you know, doesn't be around all the time and kind of
very hard to think that at age stage rules that change can help evaluate from your perspective. So say age is training and learning, but also they're not willing to do it and not force them to it between anyway, it's going to start on group 5. You have the conversation with players, one of the key things we try to do is really try and get to know each of the players personally about what motivates them, whether they want to see what their action plan is, and get them to be aware of what's best for them. If they don't want to do it and they want to spend that then that's fine. That's what they want to do. Because it is a key thing to sort of use this as a sense of the problem that more people are going to not trained or willing to do it. And the same issue there. I suppose it goes back to that case by case basis. Like one person play, one best mentality, and is it something they actually want to do? And if you don't want to do it, then well, sometimes
You can do that as well. We usually get sort of, and that includes discussion, player and parent, when we're a little bit younger, because then parents will have their own perceptions of where their boy and girl should play. I think that the more you can do that at a younger age group to move them around, position-wise, it becomes a lot more easy to have those discussions.
I can see Gilly's getting really excited to talk about front.
Yeah, I'm here. Can everyone hear me? I think my big take on it would be don't overthink positions. We would identify pretty quickly if we felt there was a positional transfer. If someone was there with physical potential or some tactical ability or some good skills, we would identify that. So I would argue 9 and 10 are probably the only positions where there'd be like some position-specific stuff. Everybody else can be the same in terms of what you're coaching them. Like have principles and philosophies that express skill, explore the game, want to play with width, like be exciting, because that's the stuff we're looking for. You know, if someone says to me I'm a tighthead prop at 14, you're probably not. So just really focus on those skills, tactical awareness, develop players holistically. You know, that stuff will really get picked up later. And I can't express that enough, really.
So just to cover off on that, so we had a guy yesterday came off the bench to try a prop, positional transfer, and he's not ready yet for academy scrum. He came on, he had 15-20 minutes, did some really good stuff in attack. He had one scrum, and it didn't go well. And for the good of his development, we have to remove him from the game. Now he's really cheesed off, so he's like, I'm enjoying that. But actually, as part of your learning, it's not going to be safe to keep you up against that. You did some really good stuff, but when it came to the nuts and bolts, you're not ready yet, and we'll work with you to develop that. So it's constantly changing. But it's a really good point, mate. Go on.
I was just going to say, I find the conversations are really, really fascinating, and the questions being asked are really, really good. I'll probably come back to a really, really early stage that don't overthink things. Keep things really, really simple. There's plenty of time. So if I don't get my nominations right today, or I'm only nominating 2 today, or 3 today, I don't have to worry about it. There's plenty of time. I think we come back to those core principles. There's plenty of time for them to develop as a 12, a 15, a 1, a 3, a 6. There's plenty of time. There's no rush in the space. And I think that's because we have programs and because they start at certain points, we start to kind of challenge ourselves to make sure that we get things right. Completely accept that. I've been involved in this kind of stuff for about 30 odd years. If there's one thing I wished I could have told myself, it would be that. Don't panic. You don't have to get everything right today. There is no rush. But that would be my only advice to them.
Somebody definitely a lot wiser than me said it's harder to hide talent than it is to find it. They will, like people will see it, and people will be emailing myself, Gillian, picking up the phone saying, look, you need to see X, Y, and Z. So, like I said, it takes time and definitely get there. There's players out there that we haven't seen yet that will play for us in the Academy League in January. It happens every single year. So, all good. Anything else? Harty's got plenty of notes. Yeah.
Obviously, I have some 14 this year, then basically we're all starting to go to the gym, like we do.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned that maybe doing stuff that I'm not supposed to be doing, obviously, the bodies are developing and stuff. Just any sort of advice, you know, what you should do.
Yeah, just obviously, cheers, Gil. Obviously, best practice there, we want them to be supervised by somebody that has some form of knowledge about what they're doing. So obviously, if they're going to the gym at 14, I would assume most commercial gyms would have a policy that under 16s have to be there with somebody that is supervising them. If that's not the case, you probably want to talk to the facility they're going to. Yeah, so you probably want to talk to the facility, and if they've got a policy of we let 14-year-olds come in and do what they want, maybe that's not the right facility for them. But in terms of what we'd probably be advocating, like what I showed you guys earlier, it'd be really honing those movement skills, like can they move well consistently before we're even thinking about loading it or stressing it. And that's across a range of skills, like can they do a squat, a lunge, a hinge, can they do that, like say, consistently over a period of time so that movement becomes sort of second nature. Once they've done that, and that's not the sort of thing they'll see on Instagram that's getting 1 million likes, that's probably why they don't want to do it. But like we know with our technical and tactical skills, if we don't build those foundations, when they do come to put load on, it'll all crumble. And probably the gym stuff is where if it does crumble, it becomes very bad very quickly. And also in terms of like an example for us, our pre-season this year has looked totally different to last year because the 16s that have come through this year had athletic development block as soon as they came in last year. So they were 6 months probably ahead of where the other group were the year before. So we've been able to load and been able to get them through a relatively normal, in inverted commas, pre-season this year, whereas 6 weeks of last year's pre-season was me coaching everybody up to a point so they could move well, and that set us back a little bit. So yeah, go back to answer your question would be, is that the right facility for them if they're not supervised? If they are, and if there is supervision, who is supervising them? But realistically, probably at that age, they should be really looking at that movement skill ability. Can they move well? Just sort of, they can start body weight. I mean, this is probably where I'm kind of against prescribing exercises totally, because we could probably uncover a 14-year-old in DPP that would be absolutely fine and safe doing a weighted back squat. But then I'll get people that say they shouldn't touch weights till they're 16. But there probably is somebody out there that can back squat twice their body weight at 14, and they're safe doing it. And my kind of theory on that being, as long as it's safe and appropriate, there's not a problem with it. But again, if we look back to that continuum, they might get to 16 and they might have to take a step back because they've grown or they've changed, or there's something else in that model that they need to change. So I would just go back to that. Is that the right facility for them if they're not supervised, and what is that supervision they're getting?
Yeah, I think it's a really good opportune moment to discuss that. So in terms of, today's really a launch pad. So on the back of today, we aim to get a document out that says Sound of the Future is Yorkshire, and that'll cover off everything you've heard today about the pathway and what it is and what it isn't. And a lot of great work going in the background through Sharpie, through Alex and Sam, who does our analysis, to pull together a curriculum document that kind of shows the stages of athletic development. And that's really key. I think the word stages, and Chris mentioned it before, a 14-year-old who moves really safely, who can be loaded, is ready for that stage. A 16-year-old who's brand new to the sport and needs to move safely is a different stage. And our challenge and our passion would be that we can get that out. But what we do know, and this is where the difficulty comes, that the 14-year-olds don't take advice from old people like me, because I haven't been 14 for a while. They take advice from an older sibling, or if they've got an older sister, their boyfriend, and they might be going, well, I've just got this Armageddon program for muscle and fitness, and you're definitely doing that. And that's the challenge for us, is whilst the advice might be brilliant from Sharpie and it's accessible, they're getting different messages from people they look up to. So we know it's difficult, but our challenge would be, let's get the information out there as far as possible, and hopefully, as I said, collaboratively, you can say, look, the other stuff will come. You'll be able to bench press because you've got T-Rex arms, you'll be able to get there, it's fine, but at the moment in time, you need to focus on bodybuilding stuff. So that should be coming out in the next sort of week or two. We're pretty close. We wanted it for today, but the guy who does all these fancy designs decided he didn't want to take a 2-week holiday, which I thought was pretty selfish. So he's back tomorrow. I didn't hear that.
Ridiculous, isn't it?
I struggle to tell Yorkshire half the time. But he's back tomorrow, so we'll finalise all that stuff and then link it to the back of the slides that we'll send out. Double this stuff as well. So, any more from them all? Exciting, some great questions.
One, Stuart, just going back to one of your earlier slides, you don't have the Premiership club, but we've got obviously Doncaster and Fives,
Yeah.
The other pathway, obviously, the county route.
Yes.
There was obviously that link between yourself and the county at the time, but when
Yeah.
Just understand your sort of links into that now.
Yeah, so we start at, so the county team start at 17th, so we've got a really strong link with that group, and that programme's changed this year to be more of a developmental programme, so it's not a case of we'll select a squad at the end of the season and we'll play some games, so there'll be touch points throughout the season where players get developed, and we want to have a really strong link with those guys. It makes a lot of sense. The 18s is slightly different, so all their matches happen around Christmas time, and there's a nomination process to the North of England on the back of that, so we'll work with the likes of Nick's been involved with the North of England for a long time. We'll work with their coaches, so some of our guys who aren't ready for academy rugby will signpost to county. And then the under 19s is difficult because that seems to be a bit sporadic as to what happens when and stuff. But certainly with the under 20s, again, we'll work with the county and we'll understand where our guys are going. So we had guys come back from universities last year to represent the 20s. And fundamentally, that's a real good opportunity to county because there's a national competition that potentially that might be where winning becomes a focus. And remember right from the pathway slide, that's that becoming adaptable to winning. So as a county, as under 20s, my thoughts are we should be into semis and finals quite a lot. We've got a lot of resource, got a lot of players, got some fantastic coaches. That's a real good opportunity for us as a county. So, anything you fellas, you've been involved in county stuff before? Anything different?
No, smash that.
Thanks.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, like I say, all these slides will be shared, so it'll come in 2 blocks. So, like some people might not be interested in DPP stuff, so they can just watch this morning's, and some people might not be interested in the academy and just watch the DPP. But it's there to be shared, and then these documents will go live hopefully in the next week or so. They'll be on the Yorkshire website and all over our socials, which there's definitely 2 followers in the room who turned up today on the back of our social, which is fantastic. But that's where we'll share a lot of our stuff. We'll be through Twitter and Instagram. Just not everybody goes to the Yorkshire website. I won't, it's not very exciting. But we have got the best social media, as according to Next Gen 15. So
you're welcome, everybody.
Once again, massive thanks for everybody coming today. I hope you found it worthwhile, and if you want to carry on the conversation, don't really search.
Genuinely open invite. Yeah. So drop me or Dicko an email. I had some great conversations today. If you'd like to come in and watch some stuff we're doing or be around it, please drop us a message and be in. I'd love to have you all in. It'd be great. Thanks for today. From that point of view.
Excellent.
Is that us? We having it?
That could be it.
Having it.
2-3.
2-3. I said no.
Nice.
We're only 26 minutes behind. We're having now.
Should we discuss it as a G-Cells?
Pretty good.